The Forgotten Frontline. Rita gazed at the old photographs scattered across the table, each image a doorway to a forgotten battlefield far from the spotlight of history. Oscar's hands trembled as he held a picture of his squadron, memories of icy winds and endless nights on the Arctic front flooding back. Martha adjusted her spectacles, the faded photo of a makeshift hospital in Burma a stark reminder of the lives she'd stitched together with limited supplies. Vladimir's eyes narrowed as he studied a map of the Eastern Front, tracing routes with a finger that had once pulled a trigger in bitter cold. Rita could see the pain etched into each veteran's face, the weight of stories untold hanging between them like a thick fog. They had gathered in a small, dimly lit room in a forgotten corner of a city that had moved on from the war, leaving them in its shadow. The world had celebrated the heroes of Normandy and Stalingrad, but few knew of the battles fought in frozen wastelands and steaming jungles. Oscar broke the silence, his voice rough from years of disuse, as he began to speak of the Arctic convoys and the relentless fight against the cold. He described the frostbite that claimed his comrades, the nights spent huddled for warmth, and the enemy that was as much the weather as the Axis forces. Martha followed, her tone steady but laced with sadness, as she recounted the long days in Burma, where disease was often more lethal than bullets. She remembered the faces of soldiers who had fought valiantly only to succumb to malaria, their bodies broken by a war they couldn't see. Vladimir spoke next, his voice carrying the weight of countless battles, as he recalled the brutal winter campaigns on the Eastern Front. He told of frozen rivers that became graveyards, of the relentless push against German forces, and the sheer will to survive in the face of despair. Rita listened intently, her pen moving swiftly across the page, capturing every word, every emotion, every glimpse into a world long buried. She knew that these stories were more than just memories, they were pieces of a larger puzzle that history had neglected to assemble. Oscar's tale of Arctic survival was one of resilience, of men who had faced the harshest conditions and emerged with their humanity intact. Martha's experiences in Burma highlighted the forgotten sacrifices of medical personnel, who fought their own battles far from the front lines. Vladimir's account of the Eastern Front revealed the unyielding spirit of soldiers who had endured some of the harshest conditions of the war. As the veterans spoke, their voices mingled, weaving a tapestry of experiences that spanned continents and climates, yet shared a common thread. They had all fought in the shadows of the great battles, in places where the world's attention rarely lingered, but where history was equally forged. Rita realized that their stories needed to be told, not just for them, but for the generations that had grown up in the shadow of a different world. The veterans had lived through events that had shaped the course of history, yet their contributions had been all but forgotten by the wider world. Oscar spoke of the camaraderie that had kept him going, the bond between men who had nothing but each other in the frozen wastes. Martha remembered the nurses who had become her family, women who had worked tirelessly to save lives in a place that seemed forgotten by God. Vladimir recalled the friendships forged in the crucible of war, bonds that had outlasted the conflict but were slowly fading with time. Rita could see that these stories were more than just war tales, they were a testament to the strength of the human spirit in the face of adversity. The veterans spoke of the challenges they had faced after the war, returning to a world that had moved on while they remained trapped in the past. Oscar found it difficult to adjust to civilian life, his mind still haunted by the endless nights of the Arctic and the comrades he had lost. Martha struggled with the memories of the soldiers she couldn't save, the ghosts of the Burma campaign following her even in peace. Vladimir's return to civilian life was marked by a sense of dislocation, the world he had fought for seeming alien after years on the front lines. Rita knew that these struggles were as much a part of their story as the battles they had fought, the war continuing long after the guns had fallen silent. The veterans' tales painted a picture of a war that was far more complex and far-reaching than most people realized, each front a story unto itself. Oscar's voice grew quieter as he spoke of the men who had never returned, their stories lost to the ice, their names barely remembered. Martha's eyes filled with tears as she recalled the young soldiers who had died in her arms, their lives cut short in a land far from home. Vladimir's hands clenched as he remembered the countless comrades who had fallen, their sacrifices buried under the weight of history. Rita felt the enormity of the task before her, the responsibility to ensure that these stories were not forgotten, that their sacrifices were remembered. She knew that the world needed to hear about the Arctic Front, the Burma campaign, and the Eastern Front, to understand the true cost of war. Oscar, Martha, and Vladimir had fought in places where few would ever visit, but their stories were no less important than those of the major battles. The veterans' voices, once hesitant, now carried a sense of urgency, as if they knew that this might be their last chance to share their stories. Rita promised herself that she would tell their stories with the respect and care they deserved, honoring the lives they had led and the battles they had fought. She spent countless hours interviewing them, each session peeling back another layer of history, revealing the depth of their experiences. Oscar's account of the Arctic convoys became a narrative of endurance, a fight against not just the enemy but the very elements themselves. Martha's stories of the Burma campaign illustrated the human cost of war, the lives saved and lost in a place where the jungle was as much an enemy as the Japanese. Vladimir's experiences on the Eastern Front showed the brutal reality of a war that had been fought on a scale and with a ferocity that defied comprehension. Rita compiled their stories into a manuscript, her words carefully chosen to capture the essence of their experiences without losing the raw emotion. She sent the manuscript to publishers, knowing that these stories needed to reach a wider audience, that the world needed to know what had been forgotten. Months passed, and Rita waited anxiously for a response, her hopes riding on the chance to share the veterans' stories with the world. One day, a letter arrived, and as she opened it, her heart raced, the words on the page offering the validation she had hoped for. A publisher had agreed to print the manuscript, recognizing the importance of the stories and the need to bring them to light. Rita gathered the veterans together, sharing the news with them, their faces lighting up with a mixture of relief and pride. Oscar, Martha, and Vladimir knew that their stories would finally be told, that their sacrifices would be remembered by future generations. The book was published under the title The Forgotten Frontline, its pages filled with the tales of those who had fought in the shadows. Reviews praised the book for its raw honesty and its ability to shine a light on the lesser-known aspects of World War II. Rita was invited to speak at events, sharing the veterans' stories with audiences who had never heard of the Arctic Front or the Burma campaign. Oscar, Martha, and Vladimir were invited to these events as well, their presence a living testament to the stories they had shared. The veterans stood together, their heads held high, knowing that their experiences had not been forgotten, that their voices had finally been heard. Rita watched as the veterans were recognized for their contributions, the world finally acknowledging the sacrifices they had made. The book became a bestseller, its impact spreading far beyond what Rita had imagined, bringing attention to the forgotten front lines of the war. As she looked at the veterans beside her, Rita knew that their stories had changed the way the world saw the war, reminding everyone of the true cost of conflict.